Night swallowed the forest whole. Branches whipped against her face as she ran, barefoot and bleeding, her breath tearing out of her chest in broken sobs. Every step sent pain shooting through her legs, but stopping meant death, and she knew it. The shouts behind her grew closer, cruel voices laughing as if this were a game. Catch her before dawn. She was nothing to them. A poor human girl. A thief. A disposable life. Her name was Alara. Hours earlier, she had been dragged through the village square, accused of stealing food she hadn't even eaten herself. 5 apples. That was her crime. 5 apples meant to keep the orphan children alive for one more night. The crowd had spat at her, cursed her, called her filth. No one listened when she begged. No one cared that her hands shook from hunger, not guilt. Execution was decided quickly. She escaped only because the ropes snapped as she was pushed forward. Now she ran into forbidden land. The vampire forest. Cold mist wrapped around her ankles as the air thickened with something ancient and heavy. Every instinct screamed that she had crossed into a place where humans were never meant to survive. Her strength failed her at last. She stumbled, crashing onto damp leaves, her vision blurring. Footsteps echoed behind her. Alara laughed weakly through her tears. I can't run anymore, she whispered into the darkness. Please, just kill me. The forest went silent. Not the silence of safety, but the silence of something powerful paying attention. The men chasing her froze. One dropped his weapon. Another fell to his knees without understanding why. A presence emerged from the shadows. Tall. Terrifying. Moonlight revealed crimson eyes and a crown of black iron resting on silver hair. His cloak moved as if alive, stirred by unseen wind. The ground itself seemed to bow beneath his feet. The Vampire King. King Kale Noctur, ruler of the eternal night. Alara could barely lift her head, but when she saw him, fear drained from her, replaced by something quieter. Relief. If she was going to die, at least it would be quick. Kale looked past her, his gaze locking onto the trembling men. You hunted a human in my forest, he said softly. One man tried to speak. Kale raised a single finger. The scream never finished. When silence returned, Alara was shaking violently. She pressed her forehead to the ground. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't mean to trespass. I didn't want the children to starve. That was when the Vampire King's composure cracked. He stepped closer, slowly, carefully, as if approaching something fragile. You stole for children? He asked. Yes, she said, bracing herself. If someone must die, let it be me. Please, spare them. No human had ever spoken to him like that. No fear in her request, only resolve. Kale knelt. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Stand up, he said. Alara looked at him in disbelief. My lord. You will not die tonight, the Vampire King said, his voice carrying quiet authority. Not while I still rule this land. And for the first time in centuries, King Kale felt something he thought had died long ago. Not rage. Not power. Respect. The villagers didn't sleep that night. They searched the forest edge with torches, shouting her name like a curse, promising punishment for anyone who helped her. But Alara was already gone, carried through the mist like a secret the world wasn't allowed to touch. She didn't remember collapsing. She only remembered warmth, strange warmth, against the freezing night. Strong arms holding her like she weighed nothing. A steady heartbeat that shouldn't exist in something undead. And a voice, low and controlled, murmuring words she couldn't understand, but somehow felt. When Alara woke, the ceiling above her was stone carved with moon-shaped designs. Candles floated in the air without chains. The room smelled like clean linen and winter herbs. Her feet were wrapped in soft cloth. Her wounds had been cleaned. She shot upright in panic, heart racing, then froze. The room wasn't a cell. It was a bedroom, too grand for a human. A silver tray sat beside her with steaming soup, water, and bread so fresh it made her throat ache. Not the stale scraps she fought for. Real food. The door opened before she could move. A tall vampire man entered, dressed in dark formal robes. His hair was tied back, his eyes calm but sharp like a blade that didn't need to swing to threaten. He bowed slightly. Miss Alara, he said. You are awake. She tightened the blanket around herself. Where am I? Shadow Keep, he replied. Palace of the Eternal Night. Her breath caught. I'm in the Vampire King's palace. Yes. A chill crawled up her spine. Then why am I alive? The man studied her like he was deciding how much truth she could survive. Because His Majesty ordered it. Alara's voice trembled. He saved me, but he killed them. He killed those who violated his forest, the man corrected evenly. And he spared the one who begged for children instead of herself. Elara swallowed. Who are you? Lord Corvin, he said. Royal steward and keeper of palace order. I manage what the king does not wish to waste time managing. Elara looked away ashamed. If I'm here it means you want something. That's how the world works. Corvin's expression didn't change, but something softened behind his eyes, as if he'd heard that sentence too many times from too many broken people. You were brought here because you are useful, he admitted. And because you are unusual. I'm not unusual, Elara whispered. I'm poor. Corvin's gaze flicked to the bandages on her hands, hands that had stolen apples and then offered her life for children. Poor humans usually beg for mercy, he said. You begged for justice. Before Elara could respond, footsteps approached, slow, measured, heavy with authority. The air itself seemed to tighten as if the palace was holding its breath. Corvin stepped aside at once and bowed deeper. Elara's body went rigid. The door opened. King Kale Noctur entered the room like a storm in human form, silent, controlled, and impossible to ignore. Moonlight clung to him through the tall windows, tracing the sharp lines of his face. His red eyes settled on her, and for a terrifying second, she felt like he could see every ugly memory inside her. She forced herself to sit up straighter, even while fear shook her bones. You should have eaten, Kale said. His voice wasn't cruel. That was somehow worse, because it was unfamiliar. Elara lifted her chin. If you save me to punish me later, just do it now. I can't survive another hope. Kale stared at her as if she'd spoken a language older than the stones. Hope, he repeated, almost to himself. He stepped closer. Elara didn't move even when instinct screamed at her to run. You begged to die, he said quietly. But not for yourself. Elara's throat tightened. They were hungry. Kale's gaze sharpened. Why do you care for children who are not yours? Elara gave a bitter laugh. Because no one cared for me. The words escaped before she could stop them. The truth, raw, humiliating, and familiar. She expected mockery. Instead, Kale went still. For a heartbeat, the king's mask slipped, just enough for Elara to see something behind it. Buried. Dangerous. You have no family? He asked. Elara looked down. I had a mother. She died when winter took our village crops. After that, I belonged to whoever wanted to own me. A kitchen. A manager. A landlord. A town that needed someone to blame. Corvin's jaw tightened subtly, but he remained silent. Kale turned toward the window as if staring into the night helped him keep control. Humans in my realm suffer openly, he said. And yet my council insists everything is stable. Elara whispered, stability for the powerful is built on the suffering of the invisible. Kale's eyes snapped back to her, sharp, assessing. You speak as if you've been educated, he said. I read, Elara answered. When I was little, a traveling priest taught me letters. After he left, books were the only thing that didn't hit me. Kale watched her for a long moment. Then he said words that didn't make sense. You will work in my palace. Elara blinked. Work? Corvin lifted his head slightly, surprised. Kale continued, tone controlled. You will serve in the old nursery wing. Elara's blood ran cold. Nursery? Corvin's voice became cautious. Your Majesty, that wing has been sealed for years. Kale's jaw tightened. I am aware. Elara felt the room tilt. Why would you put me there? Kale's gaze didn't leave her. Because children live there now. Elara's heart stopped. Children? Corvin spoke carefully as if choosing words could prevent a disaster. 6 vampire children. Orphans of the border wars. They are difficult. No caregiver lasts more than a week. Elara stared, confused. Vampire children? Kale's voice dropped. They bite. They break things. They do not trust. They have been treated like monsters since they lost their parents. Elara's lips parted, and she didn't even realize she was whispering until the words came out. So they're just like human orphans. The silence that followed was heavy. Kale looked at her, really looked, and something unreadable moved in his eyes. Exactly, he said. Elara's pulse hammered. I'm human. They'll hurt me. Kale stepped closer until she could feel the cold power radiating from him. If they harm you, he said softly, I will stop them. Corvin's eyes flicked to the king, because everyone in the palace knew what those words meant. The vampire king didn't promise protection lightly. Elara tried to breathe. And if I refuse? Kale's expression didn't change, but his voice sharpened like winter air. Then you returned to the village that wanted you dead. Elara flinched. Kale paused, and when he spoke again the cruelty was gone, replaced by something almost honest. I do not offer this to punish you, he said. I offer it because you have already proven something my kingdom lacks. Elara's throat tightened. What? Kale's eyes darkened with memory. Someone willing to stand between children and death. Elara looked at the food again, the warmth, the bandages, the clean bed. The impossible mercy. It felt like a trap because kindness always had been. But in the king's voice she heard something else. Not manipulation. Meat. A king who had power over everything, except what he had lost. Elara whispered, if I do this, if I care for vampire children, what do I get? Corvin inhaled sharply. Humans didn't bargain with the vampire king. But Elara did. Kale stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly he said, safety. Food. A roof. And the authority of my name. Elara's chest tightened painfully. And the village? The manager who accused me? The people who hunted me? Kale's mouth curved, not into a smile but into something colder. They will learn, he said, what it means to touch what belongs to the crown. Elara's breath shook. Because that sentence, terrifying as it was, meant one impossible thing. The most feared king in the world had just claimed her. Not as property. As protection. Elara expected fear. She expected blood, fangs, screaming, maybe even death. What she did not expect was silence. The nursery wing of Shadowk Keep felt different from the rest of the palace. Softer. Older. The stone walls were etched with faded carvings of moons and stars, worn down by time and abandonment. Dust clung to corners no one had touched in years. Toys, real toys, lay scattered across the floor, cracked and forgotten. 6 small figures stood in the center of the room. 6 pairs of glowing eyes fixed on her. They were children, small, thin and sharp-edged with hunger and mistrust. Their fangs showed even when their mouths were closed. One clutched a broken wooden horse like a weapon. Another hissed softly, crouched low like an animal ready to strike. Elara's body went cold. Behind her, Lord Corvin stopped at the doorway. He did not enter. They have driven away 12 caretakers, he said quietly. 1 fled screaming. 2 were bitten. The rest quit. Elara swallowed. And you thought a human would survive? Corvin hesitated. The king did. That made her chest tighten. She took 1 slow step forward. The smallest girl snarled and lunged. Elara did not scream. She dropped to her knees. The child collided with her chest, claws scraping her collarbone. Pain flared, but Elara wrapped her arms around the shaking little body before instinct could stop her. It's okay, she whispered, voice breaking. I won't leave. The room froze. The child stiffened, clearly confused. No one had ever held her without trying to restrain her. Elara felt the girl's heartbeat, too fast, too afraid. I know you're angry, Elara murmured. You should be. Losing parents hurts. Being locked away hurts more. The child's fangs grazed Elara's neck. Corvin moved instinctively, but a presence filled the hallway behind him. King Kale stood in the shadows, unseen by the children. Watching. The girl didn't bite. Instead she began to cry. A raw, broken sound ripped from her chest, and the other children followed, fear spilling into the open like floodwater once a dam had cracked. Elara was overwhelmed in seconds, small hands clutching her sleeves, her hair, her arms. She didn't pull away. She let them cling. Hours passed. By evening the children were asleep, curled against her like exhausted kittens. Elara sat on the floor, back against the wall, arms numb, heart aching in a way that felt familiar and terrible and right. She didn't notice the king until he knelt across from her. You allowed them to hurt you, Kale said quietly. Elara looked down at the shallow claw marks on her skin. They weren't trying to hurt me, she said. They were trying to see if I'd disappear. Kale's eyes darkened. They have bitten warriors, he said. Threatened nobles. Terrified monsters. Elara met his gaze. Because monsters are the only ones who ever survived them. The words hit harder than any blade. Kale stood slowly. You speak of pain as if you've lived it. Elara gave a tired smile. Pain is a language everyone understands. Some of us just grow up fluent. That night, Kale stood outside the nursery doors long after the palace slept. He remembered another room. Another child. Another night he had promised protection, and failed. Days turned into weeks. The children changed. They stopped hissing. Stopped biting. They began to wait for Elara by the door. They brought her broken toys to fix. They learned to sleep without nightmares when she stayed. And slowly, dangerously, The palace noticed. The council did not approve. A human influencing royal blood, one elder sneered. This is weakness. Kale listened in silence, until one noble insulted her. She is a servant playing mother, the vampire spat. A stray girl pretending to matter. The room went cold. Kale rose from his throne. Leave, he said. The noble laughed, until the shadows moved. Kale's voice echoed through the hall like a death sentence. She matters because I say she does. No one spoke after that. That night, Ilara stood alone in the nursery, staring at the moon through tall windows. She felt eyes on her. You shouldn't defend me, she said without turning. It will make them hate you. Kale stood beside her. They already fear me. That's not the same. No, he agreed quietly. It's easier. They stood in silence. Then Ilara whispered, Why are you really doing this? Kale closed his eyes. Because you remind me, he said, voice rough, that my kingdom still has children worth saving. Ilara turned, startled. And you, he added, meeting her gaze, are not as powerless as you believe. Something shifted between them. Not love. Not yet. But recognition. Two broken souls standing on opposite sides of power, learning slowly how to trust the space between. The first stone was thrown in the council chamber. It wasn't literal, but it might as well have been. A human has no authority over vampire children, Elder Varix hissed, his pale fingers tightening around his staff. This experiment has gone on long enough. Ilara stood alone at the center of the hall. No chains. No guards holding her down. That was Kale's decision. If she is to be judged, he had said, she will stand as she is. Bare. Human. Unarmed. The elders circled her like vultures in silk robes. Power pressed down on her lungs until breathing hurt. Their eyes glowed brighter with every whispered accusation. She has altered royal heirs. She softens discipline. She poisons the children with human weakness. Ilara kept her hands still, even as fear tried to crawl up her spine. She had faced hunger, beatings, execution. She would not break here. Elder Varix leaned forward. Do you deny influencing the royal bloodline? Ilara lifted her chin. I taught children how to sleep without screaming. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Another elder sneered. You presume to correct vampire ways? No, Ilara said calmly. I presume pain works the same on everyone. The temperature dropped. From the throne, Kale did not move. That frightened them more than if he had. You were nothing before this palace, Varix spat. A thief. A beggar. Yes, Ilara said quietly. And still I stood between children and death. Can you say the same? The silence shattered. Power surged as the elders unleashed their will. Ancient magic coiled toward her like a living thing. Ilara felt it crush her knees into the stone floor. She did not scream. She did not beg. She pressed her palms to the ground and whispered, I will not kneel to cruelty. That was when Kale stood. The shadows obeyed him instantly. The hall shook as his power unfurled, not violent, not wild, but absolute. The elders staggered back, their magic collapsing like ash. She stands under my protection, Kale said, voice echoing like judgment. You will not touch her. Varix snarled. You endanger the throne for a human. Kale's eyes burned. I endanger the throne by ignoring injustice. He descended the steps. Every vampire bowed instinctively. Kale stopped in front of Ilara, and to the shock of the council, he knelt. Not in submission. In alignment. She saved my children, he said. And in doing so she exposed the rot in this kingdom. Gasps filled the chamber. You fear her because she reminds you of something you abandoned, Kale continued. Responsibility. He turned to Ilara, lowering his voice. They demand proof, he said. Give it to them. Ilara swallowed. Her heart pounded, but clarity settled over her like armor. There is a sickness, she said, standing despite trembling legs. Not of blood, but of neglect. Human villages near your borders lose children every winter. Vampire orphanages overflow while nobles debate tradition. She met Varix's gaze. I can fix that. Clinics. Shared care. Protection for the weak, human and vampire alike. Laughter erupted. Arrogant girl, an elder scoffed. You think you can heal centuries of rule? No, Ilara replied. But I can start today. Kale turned to the council. She will lead this reform. Outrage exploded. She is human. She has no rank. Kale's voice cut through them like a blade. Then I will give her one. The hall fell silent. Kale extended his hand to Ilara. By my authority, he declared, I name Ilara Warden of the Nightbound Children. Ilara's breath caught. This title grants her command over all orphan care, protection wards and medical reform within my realm. Varix trembled with fury. You give her power without blood. Kale's eyes hardened. I give her power because she earned it. Ilara stared at his hand. All her life, power had been something done to her. Now it was being offered. She took his hand. The magic recognized her instantly. Light flared around her fingers, soft, silver, ancient. The elders recoiled. She's bonded, someone whispered. The throne accepted her. Kale didn't let go. That night, as the palace slept uneasily, Ilara stood on a balcony overlooking the city. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly. Kale stood beside her. I did. You made enemies. I already had them. Ilara hesitated. Why me? Kale turned to her fully. Because when you were powerless, he said, you chose mercy. And that is the rarest strength of all. Their hands were still touching. Neither pulled away. The assassination attempt came at dawn. Ilara sensed it before she saw it, not magic but instinct. The same instinct that once told her when a blow was coming, when hunger turned dangerous, when kindness would be punished. She was in the Eastern Ward, reviewing clinic plans with healers, human and vampire working side by side, when the air shifted. Too quiet. A child screamed. Ilara turned just as a shadow detached itself from the ceiling, blade flashing with poisoned silver. She moved without thinking. The knife buried itself in her shoulder. Pain exploded through her body, sharp and blinding, but Ilara didn't fall. She grabbed the assassin's wrist with her uninjured hand and slammed it into the table with everything she had. Guards flooded the room seconds later. Too late. By the time Kale arrived, the assassin was dead, and Ilara was on the floor, blood soaking her sleeve. Kale felt something inside him snap. He crossed the room in a blur, dropping to his knees, hands shaking as he pressed them over her wound. Stay with me, he ordered, voice breaking through centuries of control. Ilara smiled weakly. You look angry, Your Majesty. His eyes burned. You are bleeding because of me. No, she whispered. I'm bleeding because change scares cowards. He lifted her, didn't care who saw, didn't care what tradition demanded, and carried her through the palace like a king who had already lost too much. The council chambers burned that night. Not with fire. With truth. Kale stood before the nobles, Ilara at his side, pale but standing. You wanted proof she was a threat, Kale said coldly. So you sent a blade. Silence. You failed. Varric stepped forward, desperation etched into his ancient face. She weakens us. She makes vampires hesitate. Kale's voice thundered. She makes us humane. He turned to Ilara. Tell them, he said softly. Ilara took a breath, steady despite the pain. I don't want your throne, she said. I want your children to live. I want human villages to stop burying the weak while castles debate pride. I want a world where power protects, not consumes. She looked at Kale, eyes shining. And I believe this king wants the same. The room felt different. The magic listened. The ancient laws stirred. An elder whispered in awe, the night oath. Before anyone could stop it, the runes beneath the throne ignited. The realm had chosen. Kale froze as power surged, not into him but through her. Ilara gasped, light wrapping around her like a living crown. The bond? Someone breathed. She's not just protected, she's chosen. Kale knelt. Not as a king. As a man. If you will stand beside me, he said, voice raw, this realm will never be ruled by fear again. Ilara's hands trembled as she reached for him. I don't want to be worshipped, she said. I want to be heard. Kale looked up at her with something no one had ever seen in the Vampire King. Well, then be my equal, he said. My queen, not of blood but of mercy. Ilara helped him rise. The palace bowed. Not because they were forced. Because they felt it. Months later winter came, and no child starved. Clinics opened across borders. Orphanages became homes. Vampires guarded human villages. Humans stopped whispering monsters and started saying protectors. And at the heart of it all, a girl who once begged to die. And a king who learned how to live again.